council members present, so I'll call the meeting to order at 6:31 p.m. on this May 11th. We are meeting via teleconference, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Present.
Strong.
Here.
Stransky.
Yes.
Connie.
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes, present. Thank you all for being here today. Our next order of business is public communication. The City Council welcomes participation in its meetings. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person so that everyone has an opportunity to address the council. If you're here this evening to talk to us about an item that is not on the agenda, this would be your opportunity. Are there any members of the public? I see Olga O'Neill has her hand up. Olga, why don't you go ahead and begin? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having public comment. I just wanted to say that as a member of Friends of the Library and a citizen, I wanted to just make sure everybody knows that there is a petition being circulated right now for a ballot measure. We want to get it on the ballot so that we can have a permanent measure. What we used to have is Measure A. Measure A is still in effect, and it's basically what funds our libraries. And as many of you remember, before November of 2011, libraries were severely cut, and we would just love to see this get on the ballot to make it permanent and to also increase it from an eighth of a cent to a quarter of a cent so that we can also have 40% of that money go to capital improvements. So there's lots of people circulating this petition, and we'd love to get your signatures so that we can get it on that ballot for November. And so, thank you. I mean, this, as you all know, am I still on? Yeah.
Yes, you're still on.
Yeah, as you know, the library affects all of Mendocino County, and I think anything we can do for Willits is just a better thing. It supports education, entertainment, and creates so many programs for children and adults. So it's a kind of nice community hub. So please keep that in mind. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. The council can't discuss matters that aren't on the agenda, but would you like to give out any public information on where individuals could reach out?
Thank you. Yes. I think the easiest thing is anybody could call me, Olga. Can I get my phone number? 707-272-5244, or leave a message at Friends of the Library through our public library. I know the Willits Weekly has run some articles as well, which has been great. And just if you see somebody that is collecting these signatures, or you want to be somebody that helps collect those, please contact us. We would love to help. Melinda Clark is heading up our area. She's the coordinator for our area. I'm just kind of helping out. But near and dear to my heart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to address the council on an item not on the agenda? All right, I don't see anything in the chat. I don't hear anything, so I'm going to move on, close public communication, and move on to public matters. Our first item is a presentation by the California Conservation Corps. So would love to hear an update on the Willits campus. This is an exciting project.
It is an exciting project. Thank you, Mayor Rodriguez and City Council. My name is Jared Patton. I'm the Regional Deputy Director representing all of our California Conservation Corps centers in the North State, and I think it's been Well over a year since we were together last. We'd love to reacquaint you with the project that's going on in Willits. In fact, if I recall correctly, Brian Bender was being sworn in January of 21. I think that was the last time we were all together. Since then, a lot has happened. There's a lot of movement and activity, and we are really excited over the developments of the last year or so. I'm joined this evening with our Executive Director, Bruce Saito, our Director of Capital Outlay and Facilities and Maintenance, Dan Millsap, and then our District Director, John Button, who is the Director over the current Ukiah Center, which will be moving the entire community up to the Willits Center. We'll go with Dan first, and then John, and if there are any questions from the council and members, we'd love to take those, but really glad to be back, and I will turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Jared. Yeah, we'll do. Hello, Mayor and council members. I sent in an attachment. I don't think I could share my screen, but a quick kind of like a fact sheet to give you a little update, and I got a little other more information too, so I don't know who could pull that up for me, because I cannot share my screen right now. There we go. Perfect. Thank you very much. Can we zoom that in a little bit? Dolores. Thank you. So this is kind of a conceptual rendering that was done showing what will be the future administration building at Willits. Colors are going to be different, but if you can scroll down, please, a couple key dates for the construction milestones that we're going to have. Here we go. Sorry. So we've started work in April. And right now, you guys have had some rain, so we're kind of slowed down a little bit. But we're hoping to pour the first footings for some dorms towards the end of this month. August, we should have the first building dried in. I mean, everybody can read this here himself too. And then October, we're going to work on the inside interiors. And then February will be another big one for, October for the exteriors, February the inside interiors. And then the final completion happening towards the fall of 2023, maybe into 2024, depending on rain delays. Next page, please. So the final, this is kind of a concept of the final layout for the residential center. There's going to be 12 buildings in total. Kind of along the right side, you can see kind of the path of the 6 dorms leading to the 7th Comet building. Next to that will be the education building closest to the highway, the recreation building just below that, and then to the straight left would be the multi-purpose, which will have a gym and food service, and then behind that would be the warehouse. And then to the side across the trees to the west, you'll see the solar array along with emergency vehicle hookups. And John, I'm probably going to maybe cut and feel a little bit. Can you please scroll down, Doris? So you can see on the left side, be kind of the interior finishes for the top picture there would be the multi-purpose gym. Below that is showing just more of the campus a little closer, and then the warehouse at the bottom. But the C's have been in Mendocino for over 35 years, and we'll be able to house, when completed, 105 core members. And in 2021, with our core members represented 33 of the 58 counties within the state. So we're super excited, and by the time we complete this, we're going to have 2 fire crews stationed, or at least housed, at our new center. And we also do other work with natural resources, salmon habitat restoration, and we cover Mendocino, Lake, Sonoma, and Marin counties. To date, the contractor has they've acquired a 12,000 square foot warehouse kind of adjacent to the property for storage of equipment and materials. The temporary construction fencing is in. We've begun doing the wetland environmental sensitive habitat best management practice fencing around it, so that we were able to protect it during construction. We won't encroach on it. We've got about 20% cleared grub, removing the vegetation to get ready to do subgrade and other earthworking Right now, dewatering, I know the state's in a drought, but groundwater depth is 1 foot below the surface right now on site. And so we're working through with the dewatering. We've gotten 60 submittals so far. The contractor's procured about $500,000 worth of materials so far. And we've also reached out to the Water Resources Board and City of Willits Engineering Department to try to coordinate logistics for things such as like the water line tap and things like that. And over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be focusing on, as I mentioned, the dewatering, completing the environmental protective fencing, and then rough grading the roads and getting ready to pour, like I said earlier, some of the footings towards the end of May. And that's the end of my update. If there are any questions. Yes. Okay.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. This is indeed very exciting. Can you explain just in a little detail, what is dewatering?
So part of the, we have to excavate to be able to put in things below ground like the stormwater drains, water lines, sewer lines, other concrete structural components to support the buildings. And so when we take, let's say, like an excavator to dig a trench, 1 foot below the ground surface, they're encountering water. So if you dig the trench deeper than 1 foot, it just fills with water. And so you're not able to get any of the engineering structure that you need to support the foundations, let alone compaction or the wet utilities and dry utilities that need to go in there. So basically, if you you're looking at a side cut, like you're looking into the ground, water would be 1 foot below the ground surface. You can't build with that kind of condition. And so they're going to have to do, I'm not sure how they're going to do it yet, but I would envision some sort of hole they dig that fills with water that they pump out. So that way it'll drain the water down underneath where we need to work and pull the water away so we can excavate.
That makes sense, and I think anybody who's lived in Willits for any amount of time knows that the water table is quite high. I'm just curious, the council has been approached recently by I can't remember their acronym, it's basically a trout organization, Trout Unlimited, to try to add more water to our local creeks and waterways. Is this something that could benefit them if you're dewatering and they're wanting more water?
Sort of. I wish it would work that easily. It doesn't quite work that way. There are 2 seasonal ephemeral streams on the property as well that are protected through like the Army Corps jurisdiction. It's sort of like creating like a little, we're pulling from one area just to create a limited, localized decrease in water, but the surrounding area is still saturated. And so I don't know. I mean, there are water board requirements on how we discharge that pumped water, because you can't just put it straight into like a water source, because you need to make sure it's not contaminated, and there's other potential concerns of we're pulling it from the ground. Is it going to do something, increase sediment in the streams, which would be bad for the ecosystem and the wildlife there too? So it's kind of a little bit more complex than just, we're pulling water out, can't necessarily just save it and then put it elsewhere.
Thanks, appreciate your answer.
Absolutely.
Gonzalez?
Dan, so it looks like your final completion date's in 2024. You see it occupied before then at some level, or it won't be occupied and in use until the site is completed?
It won't be occupied until we're fully completed. There's a few reasons for that, one of which the contractor is fully liable for ensuring the entire construction zone prior to occupancy. And so we can't really piecemeal it in this kind of situation. And then also, ultimate state fire marshal sign-off will issue the occupancy certificate saying you've met all of the fire life safety codes and you can now occupy the structure. And that's when the state will then take probably initial substantial occupancy. As the contract isn't including, the state, we will be bringing in the beds for the dorms, say, the office furniture, things like that. So once we get the occupancy from the fire marshal, then we can start transitioning and bringing in all the other support furniture, materials, the IT networks, things like that. I try to overlap that a little bit But we'll see how it happens. But I'm anticipating probably early 2024 we will occupy the location. And we'll also have to coordinate too. There's notifications for our Ukiah Center, that we need to notify for HR requirements for staffing to be relocated, as well as just we're moving from one home to another home, and there's just the logistics that are involved with that.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Dan, I had a family member go through the CC in Ukiah and had a good experience, and I think that Willits is very fortunate to have this in our communities. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Mayor Rodriguez. Yeah, everybody with the C's, I think, can agree that we are really looking forward to this new location and transition and being part of the community.
John, is there anything else you'd like to add or go into specific about the core, the program, some of the crews you have, and some of the projects you do in the area?
Yeah, Jared. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for allowing us to present tonight. The unique thing about Ukiah is we do a lot of salmon habitat restoration. That's one of our specialties. And the area where we perform most of the work is in between Willits and Fort Bragg on Highway 20 and the tributaries of the Eel River. We've been there for many, many years and put in a lot of structures and habitat to try to restore the salmon population. And so usually between the months of July and October, we have at least two 15-person crews in the creeks doing that work. We have up to 4. And mainly we end in October because of the rain. Sometimes we'll extend the season if it's a drought or if there's not a lot of rain. Currently we have one seasonal CAL FIRE Type 1 fire crew that's based out of Ukiah. When we move up to Willits, we're going to have 2 crews, and we're going to have 4 resource crews and 2 Type 1 fire crews. A lot of other work that we specialize in is trail work. We build trails, boardwalks, bridges. We've done a lot of work in the Jackson State Demonstration Forest there along 20. Right now we currently have about 75 Corps members in Ukiah, and when we move up to Willits, we're going to have 95 up to 105. And so you can imagine we do a lot of volunteer events in the community, Relay for Life. We do a lot of food bank, cleanup stuff. So there's going to be quite a few Corps members trying to volunteer in the community once we move up there. We're already doing a lot of work in Willits. So the past 2 years, we've been doing fuel reduction up in brook trails. We have a couple internships, one with Caltrans, currently assessing waterways that go under the freeway and the 101 and trying to remove the obstacles, making it available for the salmon to go up those. And that's about it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated. Before we close out, Bruce, I know you're about to catch a flight over there. Is there anything you want to say to round it out?
Oh, thanks, to everyone on this call. I can't express our appreciation for your support, and know that this team and others are available as we go through this construction process. Don't ever hesitate to call on us if you see something that doesn't look right or that you have questions about, because has been really clear, I think, by the statement by all of our staff here, by Dan, by John, and by Jared, is we want to be an important part of this community, and we're not just going to come in and go away. We plan to stay for a long, long time, and so that's the purpose of this meeting. We want to, again, reinforce our commitment to the Willits and community in Mendocino County. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. At this time, I'll open it up to the public if they have any questions or comments for you. I am remote, and unfortunately, I can only see 6 screens on my tablet here. So, Vice Mayor Connie, if you see somebody with their hand up, feel free to call on them. All right, it looks like we don't have anybody from the public, but again, Willits is happy to have you in our community, and we look forward to this project's completion.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Take care,
you.
everyone.
Have a wonderful evening. All right, our next order of business is item 3B, our local road safety plan presentation, the Mendocino Council of Governments and TJKM, the Transportation Planning Consultants.
All right, Dolores, can we have the presentation on the screen? That'd be wonderful. All right, is this good? Yeah, being the presentation. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone, respected mayor, council members, and members of the community. Thank you for allowing us to present tonight. Welcome to the presentation for the city's local road safety plan. Preparing a local road safety plan facilitates the development of local agency partnerships and collaboration, resulting in a prioritized list of improvements and actions that can be taken by the city to enhance traffic safety for all modes of transportation. The LRSP also offers a proactive approach to addressing traffic safety needs and demonstrates agency responsiveness to safety challenges. Next slide, please. All right, so, the purpose of this meeting, this presentation, is to really present to the city the local road safety plan that has been prepared. We're seeking council comments and feedback and eventually council approval. Next slide, please. So what is a local road safety plan? So the overarching goals of a local road safety plan is to really reduce fatalities and severe injuries that have occurred on the city's roadways and intersections attributed to traffic collisions. Number two is to identify, analyze, and prioritize roadway and intersection safety improvements on city roads. And lastly, every agency is required to complete a local road safety plan to be eligible for the Highway Safety Improvement Program grant funding. The main important fact about a local road safety plan is also that it considers engineering as well as non-engineering strategies, which comes under the 4 E's of traffic safety, which includes education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency medical services. Next slide, please. Wonderful. So quickly going over, the project status and milestones. As you can see here, we've quickly summarized the entire project, with every step of the project. We started with the data collection. We analyzed collision data, and I identified a high-risk network entailing a list of intersections and roadway segments. We then met with the stakeholders and presented to them the findings. Further on, we identified emphasis areas that the city needed to focus on, identified appropriate countermeasures, followed by safety projects, and then we met with the stakeholders again to present to them some of the viable improvements that can really help the city secure funding for as well. We estimated costs and conducted a benefit-cost ratio analysis to identify, to really, for the city projects that had been identified, to get a high and competitive benefit-cost ratio. Lastly, all the effort has been, now combined into a report, into a plan, and here we are presenting this report for council feedback and council review. So the next steps will really entail working with the city to prepare the 8 grant applications, also projects for which just opened, just this Monday on the 9th of May, and the applications are due on the 12th of September. We will be working with the city.
A quick question. Is that a second stakeholder meeting supposed to be October 14th of 2021?
Yes, that's correct. Apologies. Okay. That's an error from our end.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for picking that up. Thank you. So yes, the next step entails we'll be working with the city to prepare 2 8 grant applications. Something to also note about this project is that for the entirety of the project timeline, we had a project website with an interactive map input platform where stakeholders and committee members alike could go anytime, learn more about the project and also share with us their traffic safety related concerns. So we will be covering major findings from from everything that we heard from that platform as well. Next slide, please. All right, so looking at, a brief overview of the collision analysis findings, we considered data from the year 2015 to 2019, and there were a total of 200 collisions that occurred in the city of Willits. The vast majority of these were property damage only collisions, and only 4% of these collisions were severe injury collisions, which are high injury collisions. Next slide, please. So this slide quickly summarizes the high injury intersections that have been identified. The intersection of Main Street and Commercial Street is the intersection that really tops this list. It had the highest number of collisions, with 6 collisions that occurred in the 5-year time period, followed by the second intersection on this list, which is Main Street and State Street, which had a total of 3 collisions. Next slide, please. Looking at, the high injury corridors across the city, the corridor of North Main Street from Sherwood Road to East Commercial Street had the highest score, and it was at the top of the list with a total of 6 collisions. Sherwood Road and South Main Street also had a higher score, meaning that they also had higher amount of severe injury collisions compared to other roads in the city of Willits. Next slide, please.
I have a question. On this slide that we just saw, as well as on the previous slide, there were a couple of intersections that had higher numbers of collisions but a lower EPDO score. Can you explain that a little bit? Why would an intersection with so many more collisions be considered less dangerous?
Sure, that's an excellent question. So, an EPDO score is based on the severity of collisions. The higher the severity of collisions, higher is the EPDO score. So as you can see, there might be 10 collisions on the segment of, South Main Street between Hazel Street and East Commercial Street, but these 10 collisions might be lower in severity. But the 6 collisions that occurred on North Main Street from Sherwood Road to East Commercial Street would be high injury collisions, meaning might have a number of high severity collisions. Does that make sense? So an EPDO score is really based on the severity of the collisions that have occurred at these locations.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Great question. Thank you. So, moving forward and looking at the outreach results, as I mentioned, we had a web-based interactive map input platform, which was published online to obtain public comments. The survey period, as you can see, was open from March to September last year, and we received a total of 35 comments. The most commonly commented traffic safety issue was speeding, with a total of 11 comments. And the most commented on location with speeding issues was Main Street. Pedestrian safety was the second most commented safety issue with a total of 9 comments. And the most commented on location with safety issues was Sherwood Road and Main Street. There's a lot of overlap that we saw between, what we learned from the data from the identified high injury network list and, from all of the list of high risk location that we received from the public comments, like, with East Commercial Street, Main Street, and Sherwood Road having a high EPDO score as well. And they were really heard of a lot as part of the public comments as well. Next slide, please. So after really completing the collision analysis, we developed an emphasis areas memo that analyzed the most common attributes of collisions that have occurred in the city of Willits, with specific emphasis on attributes of fatal and severe injury collisions. So the top emphasis areas that were found for the city was intersection safety, pedestrian safety, and unsafe speed collisions. Again, very aligned to what we heard, as well as what we learned from the collision data. Next slide, please. So, coming to the E strategies that were identified as a part of this plan. This is really about the 4 E's of traffic safety, which is education, enforcement, engineering, as well as emergency services. So education really entails giving drivers information about making good choices, such as not texting while driving, avoiding alcohol or medications affecting levels of consciousness, wearing a seatbelt, or informing people about the rules of the road. Enforcement is enforcement of traffic laws, a visible police presence that tends to deter motorists from unsafe driving behavior. Engineering addresses roadway infrastructure improvements to prevent crashes or reduce the severity of collisions when they occur. And lastly, we have emergency services that provide rapid response and quality of care when collisions causing injury by stabilizing victims and transporting them to other facilities. So combining these strategies really helps increase the likelihood of the success in improving safety. Next slide, please. So quickly going over, some of the signalized intersection improvements that have been identified. 3 of the high-risk intersections in the list that we saw previously were signalized intersection, and some of the improvements that have been identified include signal intersection improvement, S02, improvement of signal timing, installation of raised median on approaches, installation of pedestrian countdown, installation of advanced stop bar before crosswalk, and lastly, modification of signal phasing to implement LPI. Next slide, please. Again, a quick overview of improvements that have been identified for unsignalized intersections. 13 out of the 16 in the high-risk intersection lists were non-signalized intersections. So some of the improvements that have been identified include installation of signals, converting intersection to roundabout, installation of raised median on approaches, installation of flashing beacons as advanced warning, installing or upgrading pedestrian crossing at uncontrolled location, and lastly, installing pedestrian signal or hawk. Next slide, please. Quickly looking at some of the improvements identified for roadway segments, adding segment lighting, installing or upgrading with new signs with new fluorescent sheeting, and these could be either regulatory or warning signs, installing dynamic or variable speed warning signs, installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons, installation of edge lines, center lines, and installation of edge line rumble strips. Next slide, please. So, looking at the non-engineering strategies that have been identified for the city of Willits, under education, the city can conduct public information and education campaign for intersection safety laws, unsafe speeds, distracted driving, improper turning, and driving under influence. The city can also conduct bicycle and pedestrian safety campaigns and outreach to raise awareness of bicycle and pedestrian safety needs through various media outlets. Social media, bike and walk. The city can also update the pamphlet for crosswalk safety and bicycle safety every 3 to 5 years. One of the other strategies, enforcement is targeted enforcement at high-risk locations, and also increasing the number of personnel who have completed advanced roadside impaired driving enforcement training. Lastly, under emergency medical services, the city can install emergency vehicle preemption systems, and the city can also increase the number of EMS or fire control personnel taking traffic incident management training. Next slide, please. So get to the identified viable safety projects for the city of Willits. So we've identified a total of 5 projects. The first project is a systemic improvements for signalized intersections. The second one is for unsignalized intersection. Project 3, Project 4 is for roadway segment improvements. And lastly, we have the 5th project for pedestrian improvements to enhance pedestrian safety at a couple of signalized and unsignalized intersections. So we'll quickly take a look at each project individually. Next slide, please. So looking at project 1, which is really improvements on the 3 signalized intersections that have been identified. It is the intersection of Main Street and Commercial Street, and the improvements that have been identified for this intersection is improving signal hardware, improving signal timing, and also installation of raised median on approaches. Similarly, for the intersection of Main Street and Holy Street, we have improvement of the signal timing and installation of raised medians. Similar improvements have also been identified for the intersection of Main Street and RT20. So this is project 1. Next slide, please. Project 2 really identifies improvements for unsignalized intersections. The improvements included in this particular project is addition of intersection lighting, installation and upgrading of additional stop signs or other intersection warning or regulatory signs, and lastly, upgrading intersection pavement markings. So, and as you can see, for each individual intersection listed here, the improvement that has been suggested and identified. And in addition, something to also note here is that, with continuous stakeholder engagement and community feedback, we have looked through all the comments as collected, and high-risk locations that probably did not come up as a result of the data analysis that we did, but really, were highlighted and came up as through comments, and everything that we heard from stakeholders and the community have also been looked at and added to to these projects, and improvements have been identified for those locations as well. So, and that's really how we've tried to be very proactive, as we have identified improvements for traffic safety across the city of Willits. Next slide, please. So looking at project 3, which entails systemic roadway segment improvements, these are again, these segments are all the high-risk segments that were identified either as a result of the data analysis or from everything we heard from stakeholders and committee members. The improvements, as you can see here, include installing and upgrading with new fluorescent signs with new fluorescent sheeting, installing dynamic or variable speed warning signs, and installing edge lines or center lines. Next slide, please. Project 4, this is again a systemic roadway segment improvements project. As a part of this project, we have 3 countermeasures, which entail an addition of segment lighting, installation of delineators, reflectors, or object markers, and lastly, installation of sidewalk or pathway, to really avoid people walking along the roadway. So this has been identified for the segment of Poplar Ave between Walnut Street and the city boundary. Next slide, please. Lastly, project 5, which is a pedestrian set-aside project. The improvements that have been identified here include installing a pedestrian countdown signal, installing advanced stop bar before crosswalk, installing or upgrading pedestrian crossing at uncontrolled locations. This is for unsignalized locations. And lastly, for installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons, which is NS22PB. So for the intersection of Main Street and East San Francisco Street, we've identified NS21PB and NS22PB, which is both upgrading that crossing and at the same time adding rectangular rapid flashing beacons for the intersection of West Valley Road and Main Street, which is right by the post office. We have installing rectangular rapid flashing beacons as the suggested improvements. And lastly, for the intersection of Main Street and Commercial Street, we have installation of pedestrian calm-down signal heads and also installing a van stop bar before the crosswalk. Next slide, please. So quickly looking over, what do the next steps look like, implementation, etc. With the approval of the LRSP, the city can go ahead and implement countermeasures under the E strategies that have been identified and suggested as a part of this plan. The city can continue to monitor these high-risk locations using the performance measures that have been, that also have been listed in the plan, and also continue to discuss with safety partners. Further on, the city can evaluate the number of collisions, and if a successful reduction in the number of collisions is observed, the city can continue to monitor those locations as well, and also update the local road safety plan, every 2 to 5 years. If the city observes no reduction in the number of collisions post-implementation, the city can evaluate or reevaluate the countermeasures and update the local road safety plan accordingly. Next slide, please. Well, thank you everyone. And yes, that brings us to the end of the presentation of this plan, and we want to open the floor for questions, comments, feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation. I'll open it up to council for any clarifying questions. I can't see everybody on the screen yet. Councilmember Gonzalez, any questions?
Yeah, actually, obviously this is kind of a very broad sort of study, and my question would be, is there some sort of matrix that would follow along that, obviously in a perfect world we would have tons of money, tons of grant money, and we would just address all of these things, but we had to pick number one issue, then factor in money. Is there some sort of matrix that goes along that staff could use for this? I guess that's my question, or is that something that we would have to kind of delve into that and create our own matrix?
I could probably answer that question. I'm not sure if someone from city would like to answer that question or not. My name is Ruta Jariwala, and I am the project manager from TJKM side. Firstly, thank you, Divya, for an excellent presentation. Gary, to answer your question, it's a grant application. I know the local road safety plan also calls out for a proactive approach to treat some of these C collisions, but at the same time, fortunately, unfortunately, it is very heavily dependent on the analysis that we do. And towards the end, when we go for applying for these grant applications, they do have a benefit cost ratio that we need to keep in mind. So if your benefit cost ratio is lower, then your application is not, in that run of making it high up there, like competitive enough to grant the funds. So that would be first factor that we would be looking at, that if you have a higher benefit cost ratio for a particular project, then that's the project we would want you to go after first, because at least, our chances of getting those funds to implement some of these countermeasures are higher. So that would be one. Secondly, even if some of these countermeasures do not get funded through EDSIP, these projects could be considered into your CIP, and we could look for some other opportunities to fund these projects. Definitely, if there are locations where we see more fatal and severe injury collisions, then that would definitely be some of the locations that we really want to work towards to get more funds and get them treated. So those are some of the factors that we would have to keep in mind as far as prioritization of the projects are concerned.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's like that old adage about how to eat an elephant, and figure whatever little piece we can eat at this time would be helpful. So, thank you.
Vice Mayor Kapani?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I have to say, as much as I appreciate the thoroughness and the clarity of the presentation, I did find it a bit frustrating. Anybody who's lived in Willits for any amount of time could have probably told you, if you just asked which are, the most problematic intersections, where do we have, the biggest issues with speeding, and you nailed it. All of those are the things that people in this community have identified for years. And so in a way, it's frustrating because it feels like, yes, we've identified these again, and yes, we've made these suggestions for how they could be approved again. So what are we going to do about it? And so I guess I would just put that out to the rest of council. How do we prioritize getting some of these actually addressed in a timely fashion so that we aren't getting a report like this in another 10 years and getting the same thing told back to us again?
So some part of it will definitely be addressed because we are committed to put 2 applications together for you. So those 2 applications will be submitted, as Divya mentioned, that the calls for projects were out last Monday. And our next step will be to put together those 2 applications and submit to Caltrans to see if we could make it in. So definitely this time, the entire effort is not going to be wasted. We do have some hope of getting some grant funds. And as far as we have looked at it for right now, the BC ratios are pretty good. So I'm really going to cross my fingers and be hopeful that we get you some funds to get some of these implemented.
Thank you so much. That's encouraging to hear. I appreciate that.
Yeah, last year we kind of applied for 50 applications and we were successful to get 48 of them. So let's keep our fingers crossed.
All right. I know that there's been some changes since this report was done with the Sherwood Road intersection, and it seems like most of the complaints or the collisions, as Greta said, most of us already know it. But it's at the lights and at the crosswalk areas. It seems like Project 3 addresses most of those. I'd be curious to hear, as we move forward with this discussion from council, which projects they would prioritize. We'll go ahead and open it up to Councilmember Strong.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about calling things Project 1, and then there's about 10 in Project 2. There's about, as opposed to each intersection or each problem spot. So when you go for grant funding, are you calling a whole bunch of things Project 1, or is it within Project 1 there's 1 or 2? I'm a little confused about how the funding applications are structured, and then likewise, the things that don't get grant funding, we would be wanting to address them basically project. When I think of a project, I think of a specific intersection as opposed to a list of 8 or 10 or whatever intersections. The first question is, how does that get structured for the grant applications you're going after? And then what's left over, how are we as a city going to figure out which ones we can afford to do that are our highest priorities? To answer your first question, EDSIP applications generally have criteria of having each project include multiple locations. Just like Divya showed you the project number 1, the locations, there were 3 locations on project number 1, and all the 3 locations
we are using the same countermeasures. The only catch to that project, that application, is that in one particular project, you can have as many locations as you want, but you cannot exceed more than 3 countermeasures. So we have lumped all the locations that require similar kind of countermeasures and put that in one single project. That also facilitates us to add some locations where we don't see significant amount of collisions, but community thinks that there are near misses or PDOs, and they are concerned about those locations or intersections which have similar characteristics and reason to have future collisions. So that's what we have done. We have lumped all those locations that have similar countermeasures into one project and calculated the BC ratio for that entire package together. That's why we have 5 projects, out of which the 5th project is a pedestrian set-aside project for which you do not need any BCR ratio. Every city has approximately $250K to implement pedestrian and bicycle-related countermeasures. So that's something that you will definitely get if that ranks high. Most of the times, I think 99% of the time, you end up getting those funds. Out of 4 projects, we would have to select 2. We could apply for all 4. No, it's just that our scope is only to apply for 2 projects. And then the remaining projects, you might have to wait for other funds or put it in your CIP, like I mentioned, or city could try and see if there are other sustainable community grants or OBAC funds or any other funding sources that are available where we could apply for the other projects that are not funded through this program.
Okay, thank you. So on that subject then, are we, the council, supposed to select which 2 of the 5 projects that you're applying for, or are you doing that?
It could be a joint effort. We don't have to. We could suggest whenever the BC ratios are higher, we would definitely go ahead and suggest those projects first because the possibility of getting funds for those projects is higher. But if you want us to also apply for others, then that should be totally fine.
Okay, Councilmember Stransky, any comments, questions?
Yes, I want to say that the 3 that I have noticed, and I don't know, I saw the apparatus here, but I think Sherwood and Commercial Street in Maine are the 2 big ones for me. And a lot of it has to do with the time of day, and a lot of it has to do with people driving too fast or not paying attention. Thank you.
All right, with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? Okay, having heard none, I can bring it back to the council for further discussion, or at this point we can entertain, let's see. We already
Madam Mayor? Did you see Dusty's comment in the chat?
I did not. Thank you, Greta. Could you please share?
Madam Mayor, if I may inject here, this item was not presented for council formal action tonight. Staff is still doing internal review of the document. We had 1 round of review comments, and we just want to verify that. Our anticipation is to have this item returned to the council for consideration, and maybe we can outline some of the projects for further consideration at that time as well. So at this time, it's purely for information, and we'll work with the consultants and staff to identify some of these projects and then give that to you at a subsequent meeting.
Thank you for that clarification. And I don't see anything in the chat on my screen. So, Dusty, is there anything you'd like to share with council?
No, Mayor, I was just responding to a private chat that I got, and all I was going to share was the same thing that our city manager just shared. I have nothing further to add. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Whoops.
All right, thank you.
Everyone. Sorry about that, Dusty.
That's all right. Our vice mayor is doing her due diligence to make sure that nothing gets passed and everybody has an opportunity to be heard. So I appreciate that. If there's nothing more, we will move on. Thank you very much for that presentation. And I'm going to open the public hearing at 7:26. We'll begin the public hearing with discussion and possible action on an application for general plan amendment GPA 21-02 and rezone ZC 21-02 for David Lavelle. Our presenting staff member this evening will be our Community Director, Dusty Dooley.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Good evening. Good evening, council members. Once again, to our esteemed city clerk, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the PowerPoint that we've prepared. Oh, perfection, Dolores. Thank you. Yeah, so before you tonight for consideration is a general plan amendment and zone change for David Lavelle as the applicant, and the property owner is Margie Hanley Family Trust. Next slide, please. The request tonight involves a general plan amendment to change the general plan designation from its current community or commercial general designation to residential low density, as well as the corresponding zone change to go from its current heavy commercial zoning along with a planned unit development combining district to the single family residential zoning. There's two separate legal parcels that are included in the application tonight. The parcel 10, which is 1.97 acres, and parcel 11, 1.07 acres. So 2.04 acres total, subject to the general plan amendment and rezone request tonight. Next slide, please. So just to locate us really quick, you can see that the parcels are at the southeast corner of the city limits. Next slide, please. Getting a little closer, we have an aerial. I put a little yellow pin there for subject parcels, and we're talking about what's currently just a vacant field. Directly to the north of the subject property is the Hale Creek subdivision, those houses you see towards the middle of the screen. And then, of course, our awesome, relatively new hospital there further to the north. We're right up against the railroad tracks to the east, and then a little bit further west is Hale Creek. Next slide, please. Zooming in a little bit closer, again, here's the approximate boundaries of the two subject parcels for discussion tonight. And again, you can see it's located directly across the street from the existing Hale Creek subdivision. And then those other houses up to the east are also part of the Hale Creek subdivision. These properties are not part of the Hale Creek subdivision. Next slide, please. A little bit of background for these properties here. They were actually rezoned back in 2004, 2005. Previously, these properties were zoned residential. They were rezoned to the current commercial zoning. The purpose of the rezone was to support what the staff report called a senior medical center. And actually, this rezone also included the rezoning of the land that currently supports the Hale Creek subdivision, as well as the hospital. So this idea of rezoning the property to support the senior medical center happened concurrently around the review and ideas of those other two big projects. And I want to note that the Plan Unit Development, or the PD Combining District, is a unique tool. In this case, the city used it on these properties to require a discretionary use permit be applied for and awarded by the council before any land use was allowed on these parcels, including a senior medical facility. Moving forward to 10 years later to 2014, the city council approved a use permit to support a 24-bed assisted care living facility. That was over 13,000 square feet, 14-space parking lot, fairly large project. According to the applicant, they were unable to obtain funding to complete the project, and the use permit has expired now. Next slide, please. This is a zoning map showing the current zoning configurations in the area. The hatched area is the two subject parcels. They're currently zoned C2 and in the Planned Unit Development Combining District. The R1 single-family residential zoning that you see on your screen, that represents the Hale Creek subdivision. Further north, you have additional heavy commercial land. That land supports the hospital site. To the south of the subject parcels, you have the residential estate zoning. Next slide, please. So if the project is approved tonight, it would be zoned R1 single family residential, and what this slide is showing you is those permitted uses allowed in the single family residence zoning. So a single family residence, supportive housing, transitional housing, farm worker housing. It would still allow for a residential care home, but it would only be able to serve 6 or fewer persons. And I just want to note that the state requires us to allow for all these uses wherever we allow single-family residences. So some of the council may recall a few years we went through, we amended the zoning code based on state law as well as input from our housing element, and that's when we added these additional permitted uses to our single-family residential zoning. Next slide, please. As I mentioned previously, the zoning on the property is currently heavy commercial C2. This is not a full list of all the allowed uses in the C2 zoning, but it's some of them anyways. So a little bit more intense than what you'd expect from a single family home development. I did put that asterisk on there again to note that because of the PD combining district that's currently on the parcels, these uses that would normally be permitted in C2 are subject to a use permit currently. Again, based on its current zoning, you would not be allowed to establish really any land use without obtaining a discretionary use permit from the city council. Next slide, please. So, should the council approve the project tonight, there's 2 separate legal parcels, so the residential development could include up to 2 single-family homes, one accessory dwelling unit. Again, state law requires you allow for an accessory dwelling unit wherever you allow for a single-family residence, for the most part, as well as what's called a junior accessory dwelling unit. Junior accessory dwelling unit, again, another state requirement, but it would allow you to basically convert a portion of your existing single-family home into a separate dwelling unit, which they call a JADU, a junior accessory dwelling unit. I think it can't be bigger than 500 square feet, and it has to have a separate entrance to the outside. So in total, without further subdivision of the parcels, this is what one could potentially see as far as a residential build-out, even though the properties are fairly large in size relative to some of the other properties in the neighborhood. And again, these parcels are not part of the Hale Creek subdivision. Next slide, please. So just to summarize, mentioned that project approval allows us to support a single-family home development. It would still allow for a residential care home of 6 or fewer persons. However, the zoning would no longer support a residential care home of 7 or more persons or again, the staff report that was written back in 2004 kept referring to a senior medical center. So I went ahead and mentioned that again. Staff found that the potential environmental impacts related to land use compatibility, traffic noise, et cetera, will be reduced as a result of the project. So that's again recognizing that it was set up for a potential number of commercial uses, and this could arguably be considered a planning term called downzoning, where we're going from heavy commercial to a single-family residential zoning that allows less likely potential impacting land uses. Staff is recommending project approval subject to the findings and conditions in the staff report. And I'll just conclude in saying, in talking to Margie Hanley, as the property owner, I think the heart was set on, establishing some type of residential care home, the senior medical center. But, here we are, if it's 2005, do the math, but, we're getting towards a couple decades, and, they haven't been able to find somebody to come in and provide that use for the community there on those parcels. And so, not to speak too much for Ms. Hanley or Mr. Lavelle, but I think the thought is well, shoot, if we can't find, someone to make use of the property in that regard, well, then let's just go ahead and rezone it back to commercial and see if we can't, get some more housing built in our community. And obviously that's something that certainly our housing plan and general plan support as well. And then, Mayor, that concludes staff presentation. And I'll just note that you do have Ms. Hanley and Mr. Lavelle on the call tonight as well, I believe. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. At this time, Council, if you have any questions, and then we can hear from the applicant and then the public. Councilmember Strong?
Yeah, so question for Dusty. I guess there's two questions. One is that other parcel that is not included in this particular zoning application is still available as a senior care facility if there should be a developer wanting to do it. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember Strong. Yeah, good question, and I actually meant to point that out, so I'm glad you asked. So, yes, there is an additional parcel that's adjacent to these parcels to the west. It will remain having the C2 zoning and would be available to support a senior medical center.
Okay, and my other question is, if they were to put in a care unit with 6 or fewer residents in either of those two parcels that we're talking about in this application, could they also have an accessory dwelling unit? Does that count as one unit, and then could there still be an accessory unit?
I don't believe so. No. So let me clarify that answer. You could have a single-family home. You know what? I'll have to get back to you. I don't know the answer for sure.
Because I think that the 6 or fewer as a care facility is sort of considered like one family home, but I don't know. That was just a question. Thank you.
Okay, any other council members with questions? All right. If the applicant David Lavelle would like to address the council.
I think, this is Margie. I don't think my son wants to be a public speaker, so he told me I needed to get on his call. We really don't have anything to add. I did try to get, the Sanchoses were going to build a project, and that was the reason we did that in the first place. And then I tried to get other people to come in and build a facility, but most people don't feel that the city needs a project that big. They don't feel like it would fill up, and that they do better with these little single-family homes where 5 or 6 people are in it. like where my mother was. And so it just seems to me that it makes more sense to make it available for housing. And right now it's just a big weed patch. And my sister owns the lot to the west, and she was, I think, probably planning on building a care home for her handicapped grandson. And that's why that was also zoned for that. But I don't know what her plans are now, because they've moved. They live in Idaho and Montana.
Thank you, Margie. Are there any members of the public that would like to address us on this matter? Okay. As a matter of procedure for all items this evening and going forward that require action, I just want to do a little bit of notification on procedural changes. So now that we've had an opportunity to hear from the public, we'll bring it back to council. Before we entertain any motions, I'd like to make sure that all council members have had an opportunity to express any questions or concerns one last time. So I'll call on each council member after all five have spoken, then we'll entertain a motion. If you choose to make a motion, if you could clearly state the motion. An example on this item would be adopt the resolution approving the general plan, so on, as it states in the agenda summary report. And if you're making any deletions, modifications, or conditions, that you clearly state that after you've read the action, so that there's no confusion over what the motion is. Okay, so I'll bring it back to council. Vice Mayor Connie, do you have any further comments?
I don't. Seems pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Kransky?
Yes, I think it's good. I think it's a good project.
Strong?
Yeah, I guess I was going to say that in general, I'm not always in favor of down zoning, because we do want, I think we need more senior housing, frankly, but I like the small senior housings like they're doing at Hale Creek already, you know, those houses with 6 care units in them are very nice. So, and that seems to be more feasible. And I understand they've tried to do something bigger, so I do support it. And I think that one house that has 6 residents is considered one house, so that they would still be able to do an accessory dwelling unit if they wanted to. Those are fairly big lots, and so I don't see any impediment there. Anyway, so I do support it, and I don't see any need for any other conditions. Thank you.
Gonzalez?
Yeah, I also support it. I don't see, again, like Madge, any need for other conditions.
Right, I'm always in favor of housing. Having heard from all council members, I'll now entertain a motion.
Okay. Jerry has his hand up.
Oh, sorry, Jerry. Because I'm on my tablet this evening, you're not on my screen all the time. It keeps changing. I do apologize. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion adopting the resolution approving general plan amendment GPA 21-02 and rezone ZC 21-02, subject to conditions and approval recommended by staff. Question, would this be 21 or 2202? Clarification, Dusty, Jim.
Yes, as Margie is well aware, this project was applied for last year, so the case is correct. Case number.
All right, then, again, as stated.
This is Larry. I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further comment? I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Connie?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Enactment of ordinances. We have none before us this evening. On the consent calendar, we have the City Council minutes from March 23rd, 2022, the April 27th, 2022 minutes, and item B, which is to authorize the purchase of two 2023 Chevrolet Silverado 2500 4x4 pickup trucks with utility bodies, one for each of the water and wastewater departments for the state contract pricing of $54,731.18 each, for a total of $109,462.36 from Elk Grove Auto Winner Chevrolet, and authorize the city manager to execute the purchasing documents, as well as item C, which is a resolution ratifying extending for an additional 30 days, approving of continuing virtual city council, commission, and committee meetings pursuant to AB 361. Any questions? Anybody from the public want to address us? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Gonzalez has a question.
Go ahead.
Regarding item E on consent, a question for Brian. This is budgeted, and I guess is a question number one, and number two, were these done on the state bid, or did we bid on them individually? Or that was the question I had.
To answer the question, it's through the state purchasing program.
Okay.
So we have a little better than fair market price for the vehicles. Scott Herman did an excellent job searching out, speccing the trucks. They came in with the bodies necessary at a fair price.
Okay, and this is in the budget, is that correct?
Correct.
All right, that's my question. Thank you.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I so move, Larry.
Thank you, Larry.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Strong,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Stransky,
Yes.
Connie,
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez.
Yes. All right, item 6, monthly activity reports. There is the business license activity for April 2022 in the agenda packet. We have nothing before us as a commission, agency, and authorities. City manager reports and recommendation. City manager, do you have a verbal report for us this evening?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I have 3 items that I just want to briefly bring to the attention of the City Council and the general public. 2 are good news for the organization and the community. We've been working over the last couple of weeks since the council approved that contract for the IT services with Apex. We've been strengthening our relationship with them. We're moving forward with the switchover, changeover, onboarding, migration from GroupWise, the county-supported system, to a separate Outlook-based system. That's going to gain some momentum after the formal contract goes into place after June 1st. But Apex has been having dialogue with county staff on their experiencing how the county is doing their migration of emails, and we're learning from those exercises so we don't replicate the same type of mistakes or errors, and we can make it more efficiently. We're also looking at some improving the internet access to both the City Hall and the Justice Center. We recognize that was going to be a deficiency. We're looking at new options for that. So some improvements on the IT world, and I think that's good news. And importantly, getting back to City Hall, the contractor for the City Hall renovations has submitted all their paperwork, and I just found out today that They have submitted or are preparing the schedule for work, and looks like the work's going to start here at the end of May. And I think that is looks like the contractor is preferring to work on weekends, consecutive weekends, to reduce the impact on operations at City Hall here. We're all very excited. We would really like, I'm just putting this out there for the general public just to be mindful during the work that we're going to have some rooms and some offices may be displaced, so just bear with us during that transition. A little bit of strain and pain will go a long way because we're going to have a very functional City Hall to serve the public and allow staff to do what they need to do in a good work environment. The third item I want to bring up here, and it's something that has come to light very recently through the County Board of Supervisors' action as they go through their budgeting. And it's somewhat disturbing item, and I think it's important that we announce this, and any members of the public, the media that's listening, this is a letter write-in campaign time, or contact the Board of Supervisors. There is a threat to the county museum here that is located within the city of Willits. It's not a city facility, but it's a facility that serves across the county. It's a great facility, has some great leadership over there at the staff level. It's the general public adores that facility. It serves a purpose. So please get out to the County Board of Supervisors and the importance of that facility, and not be a subject to a budget cut where it would be closed for at least 1 year. I don't think that's necessary. I think that's unfair. And I think I may bring an item to the council's attention for submission to the Board of Supervisors as they go through their budget process. So that's what I have. Any questions? I'm here to respond.
Any council members with questions? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to department recommendations. Item A, discussion and possible adoption of a resolution awarding a contract to Boudelier Construction Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $997,113,000 for the construction of the Blosser Lane Rehabilitation Project, Phase 1, project number 2022-02, and authorize the city manager to execute the contract and approve construction change orders up to the cumulative total of 10% of the total contract amount, and to approve final plans and specifications for the said project. Our presenting staff member will be Project Manager Jeremy Ronco.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor and Council. As you said, these are simply the bid results for Phase 1 of our Blosser Lane rehabilitation project. We were happy to see Boudelier's construction come in very close to our engineer's estimate. So we have, or will have, the right amount budgeted. We've worked with Boudelier a couple times recently, and those projects went really well. So we're kind of looking forward to another successful project with them. Plans and specs are attached for your approval, and really just want to say we're pretty excited about this project. We just think it's going to be a really big improvement and going to make a really big difference. That's about
questions?
all I have. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions from council members? I have one. Are we still in sync with the school district on anticipated timelines and coordinating challenges that may come due to road impacts?
Yes. I spoke with Kevin. He's hoping to start early to mid-June. That's what we expected. So right now everything's on target. if council approves this contract, we are going to just touch base with everyone again and, make sure the school and the Sherwood Food Bank and everyone's ready for the project to start.
Okay, I'll open. Go ahead, Councilmember Connie.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeremy. Quick question. I feel like I should have picked this up from the staff report, but was this expected to be a multi-year project for the construction, or is it expected to all finish this summer?
Phase 1 is expected to finish this summer. So the full extent's shown on the plans this summer for sure.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other council questions? All right. Would anybody from the public like to address us on this matter? All right. Bringing it back to the council before we open it up for a motion. Any comments on this project? Vice Mayor Connie?
Just wanted to say I know that this has been something that the engineering department has longed to complete for years, so this must feel pretty good to be presenting this tonight, Jeremy, and I just wanted to thank you for sticking to it for all these years. It'll be great to have this accomplished.
Thanks, I appreciate that. This is a project that's a little personal for me, just given the amount of time that we've spent trying to get it done. So it will be, I'm hoping it's going to be a fun project, and it's going to be really satisfying to see it get done. So thanks.
I'm looking forward to the safety improvements that come along with this project, and I thank the engineering staff for all their hard work on this project as well. Councilmember Gonzalez?
Yeah, I want to echo what you just said, and also, while I know that we've worked well with some of these other companies, that it's nice when we can get a local company bidding on a project and they come in as the way they did. So it's nice to see that our locals can be competitive with the big guys, so I appreciate that. That's all I wanted to say.
Connie?
May I make a motion?
Go for it.
I would like to recommend that by resolution we award the contract to Boudeliers Construction in an amount not to exceed $997,113 for the construction of the Blosser Lane Rehabilitation Project.
Gonzalez?
I would like to second that motion.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. I'll call for the vote.
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Connie?
Yes.
Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next order of business, item 9B, approval to apply and receive funds from the California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery, SB 1383 Local Assistance Grant Program. Presenting staff member will be Community Development Director Dusty Dooley.
Yeah, thank you again, Mayor. Real briefly, the state back in 2016 passed Senate Bill 1383. The main crux of it is to reduce the amount of green waste and food waste that's ending up in our landfills and creating abundance of methane gas, which is a greenhouse gas there. Again, it fits into the state's overall goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So Davey Bowles, our building official, was able to provide a little bit of information on SB 1383 and some of the specific requirements applicable to our small city here. And, to the state's credit, I can only call this a partially unfunded state mandate, as they are offering up to $20,000 for the city to help implement SB 1383. So we are certainly wanting to get at those funds to assist in. I think the main idea now is to possibly get some consultant assistance to update our city code to be consistent with these 1383 regulations, as well as the model water efficient landscaping ordinance that's referenced in the agenda summary there. So yeah, just a very simple report there. Happy to try to answer any questions the council may have.
Connie?
Thank you, Dusty. I noticed in your report that you indicated that should you be successful getting these funds, that you would like to use them for education and outreach efforts, as well as in updating the city code. Do you have an estimate on how much of that $20,000 would go towards updating the ordinance and the code, and how much would be reserved for outreach and education?
I don't at this time. I think the priority will be get someone to come in here and help with updating the ordinance. And regardless of how much funds we have remaining, staff will need to make it one of many priorities to educate the local grocery stores, special events, restaurants, etc. To help promote this shared goal of diverting food waste and green waste from our landfills. And we've strategized a couple different ways as to how we might be efficient with that outreach, whether it's through business license or building or planning inspections that are otherwise required, working with the county environmental health department that typically does yearly inspections of restaurants. So, yeah.
Thank you. Just on a personal note, having participated in a couple of very large food service events at Rec Grove over the years, I've seen firsthand the amount of food waste after those events, and it's pretty appalling. So if there is something the city could do in the application process for those large events at a city facility to encourage the local groups to try to divert some of that, I think that would be a really good use and good lead from the city for our residences. I think if more people saw the amount of food waste that happens at those big events, they'd be appalled too. So anything we can do to help educate, I think, would be a good thing. Thank you for bringing this forward.
Exactly. Well said and agreed to. Thanks.
Questions?
Yeah. Did you call on me? I think you did. Yeah, I agree, and I like what Greta added to that. I don't feel as though, I think that the large food events and vendors, the grocery stores, the restaurants, the hospital, even schools, are probably the biggest bang for the buck on getting more more folks educated on how to avoid throwing food, for one thing, food in the garbage instead of into the green bins, which is at least then turned into compost, which is great. So that's the biggest bang for the buck. But I also feel like we could do a little bit more for residential users too, because it's a mindfulness that if people get in the habit of doing it right, it's not any trouble, but they have to be constantly reminded that that's what we're trying to do. It's easy to be lazy and just throw everything in one garbage can. But I wonder if Solid Waste of Willits is doing I know their bills are just a little postcard, but could they have once or twice a year a pamphlet that goes out that would reach all of the residential customers? That's one of the ideas that I think might be worth doing, and at the same time, concentrate on those bigger volume users. So anyway, I agree, and thank you for bringing this up.
Gonzalez?
I've got nothing. I mean, I think it's something we need to do, and so got to do it.
Kransky?
I'm with Jerry. I think that this needs to be done, and it certainly needs to be aware. The city needs to be aware of it. Thank you very much.
All the cities in state of California are banding together in what is the Cal Cities, and Councilmember Gonzalez is our voting member. And I'm at the state capitol this week at a Cal Cities conference, and one of the items that we've been lobbying for is $180 million we've been asking the state for out of the surplus for organic waste recycling. The state gives mandates to cities, but it's unfunded, and cities estimate that to implement this program in each city across the state, that's approximately what it would cost. The funding would help local governments implement collection, education, outreach, edible food recovery, procurement activities, and capacity planning, and minimize the financial burden the cost of implementing these regulations could have on taxpayers. So just thought I'd throw that out there. Are there any members of the public that would like to address us on this? All right. Having heard none, I'll bring it back to the council. And let's see. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move approval of the staff recommendation.
I appreciate that. Just for clarity, so that we're clear, do you mind just reading the motion itself?
It requires me to get that back on the screen. I think I can do that. The motion, not the resolution. Adopt a resolution authorizing city manager or their designee to file an application with the California Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery in an amount not to exceed $20,000, and if awarded, authorize city manager or their designee to execute the standard agreement.
All right, we have a motion.
I second it, Larry.
All right, Greta. Thank you, Larry. Further comments? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Councilmember Strong?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Stransky?
Yes.
Connie?
Yes.
And Mayor Rodriguez?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see. Department monthly reports were presented at the second meeting of the month, so we'll have those then. City Council announcements, communications, and reports. I'll start with Vice Mayor Connie.
Thank you. I attended the MCOG meeting last Monday. The biggest part of the meeting was a presentation from MCOG on a study that they had done of road conditions countywide. They detailed the pavement condition index for each municipality as well as the unincorporated areas. They gave an aggregate score for each region. They also broke down how a municipality's streets fared as far as being in good condition. What was it? Very good, good, failing. It was a pretty fascinating look at the state of the roads throughout the county. Fort Bragg in particular has done a very good job over the last 20 years improving their aggregate PCI and making major investments in their roads. Willits has stayed pretty steady. I talked a little bit about this with City Manager Bender, and he did note that the Main Street improvements were not taken into consideration in that plan, so perhaps those would increase our aggregate score. But it was a little concerning to see that Willits has the highest number of failed roads, the highest percentage of failed roads of any of the municipalities. So it's clear that we do have some work to do, and I think that our previous state of the roads that was presented by staff a couple of years ago did acknowledge that. We have a lot of roads on our list of projects and underground utilities that need to be repaired. So I just wanted to remind the council that improving the PCI was one of our priorities that we recognized last year in goal setting, and I hope that we can continue to work on that and move forward the condition of our local roads. Today I attended the Museum Advisory Board meeting. Brian beat me to the punch on it with his announcement earlier today, but it was a emotional meeting this morning with museum staff very concerned about the possibility of being shuttered for a year. I did talk today at length with a couple of the supervisors to try and find out how real that threat is. And I echo City Manager's comments that any members of the public who are concerned and want to see our museum stay open, particularly in light of the excellent work they've done in the last 3 years, rebuilding the integrity of the museum, cleaning out, deaccessioning items that were in poor condition that hadn't been brought in with proper provenance, and correct information have been cleared out, and the museum has recently been reviewed by an external body and shown to be in very good standing. So it would really be a shame if the county decided at this point to shutter it when so much good work has been done and the wheels are moving in the right direction. The Museum Advisory Board this morning agreed unanimously to send a letter to the Board of Supervisors strongly opposing an action to shutter the museum, and it is my hope that the Willits City Council will consider also endorsing a letter of that kind. And those are my reports.
I would concur. I would like to ask that that put before council at the next meeting a letter of support. Any objection from other council members? Put that on the next agenda. All right. Let's see. Councilmember Gonzalez. Thank you, Greta.
I had LAFCO on the 2nd of May, and I attended remotely, and the big issues there were the budget, and it's going to come back for the June 6th meeting for formal approval. Obviously, when LAFCO's budget goes in, each of the cities and county and districts, their fees get charged. If we ask for more, they go. So the city should be notified, and so that's the biggie that was on there. The other one is that we approved a letter for request for support from the Water Services Reorganization efforts for the Ukiah Valley. And this came from the State Water Resources Control Board. They basically have funding available to help in basically getting folks to consolidate. And they don't want to. They want to spend their money where they're wanted, and so they were asking for a generic letter from LAFCO. Obviously, I think what I said is, as long as folks want to be married, we're not opposed to it, and that's the mission of LAFCO, is to basically help consolidate services and not have replicated services. So that was the biggie there, and so we passed a letter of support for that. There were some agencies down in the Ukiah Valley that obviously feel they don't want to be forced to marry somebody, so to speak, or to consolidate, and that wasn't the intent. I think of LAFCO was more to be able to apply for that funding locally. So if folks want to do it, that's potentially a funding source. I also attended the League of Cities meeting last Friday up in Eureka, and you beat me to the punch, Mayor. And our League of Cities, it's all about local control and obviously state mandates where we don't get any money for it, and trying to make sure that our rights as cities are protected. So basically looked at some legislation on a couple bills and basically agreed to send a letter from our local league division. And then our next meeting will be in Point Arena, I believe, in August, I believe so. So that's all I've got.
Thank you. Stransky?
None, thank you.
All right. Strong?
Okay, yes, so tomorrow at 2 o'clock is Economic Development and Financing Corporation meeting. They're continuing to give out quite a few loans to up-and-coming businesses. which is great. And then on the following Thursday at 10 in the morning is the Solid Waste Management Authority. And I don't know exactly what's going to be on that agenda, but I think we're continuing to look at some things like tire and mattress and hazardous waste, household hazardous waste disposal. And I don't believe we have a new general manager yet. So those are. Oh, and I have been trying to attend the Sonoma Clean Power, even though I'm just an alternate city representative from Mendocino County. I find it fascinating, and it is so intense that there's no way I can take notes and sum it up. But I would like to occasionally give a summary about what's going on at Sonoma Clean Power, because there's a lot. For one thing, they negotiate or keep track of all the state legislation that has to do with electrical generation and distribution, and then the PUC's decisions that affect PG&E and their possible third bankruptcy. So that, it's really quite interesting and relevant, but at a sort of a statewide level. So I'll keep trying.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Did you say the MSWA meeting is tomorrow?
No, tomorrow is EDFC, and then the following Thursday at 10 in the morning is MSWA.
Okay. I had asked to receive agendas on MSWA, so I don't know if they've sent them out yet, but if not, could you forward yours to me?
I could do that. They usually send it like the end of this week, or Thursday.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all for great reports. This year, we have the League of Cities offered a new conference for mayor and city council members, and it all around advocacy for cities. And I'm here in Sacramento for 3 days with an opportunity. Today, had a meeting with Assemblymember Jim Wood and then Senator McGuire, and I had an opportunity to talk to them about some issues that were relevant to the city of Willits. One of them in particular was that around water. I was curious at the state level what might be happening in terms of water shortage and resiliency throughout the state, as well as any insight into what the plan might be in Mendocino County. Senator McGuire had stated that there is a plan in Mendocino. It's a 36 to 48 month plan to put in 2 1 million gallon storage tanks at the school district on their property, where they could store water. But in the meantime, there was funding given to the county essentially to truck in water. So I was a little concerned about the fact that we're talking 36 to 48 months out before that might happen, and then no time frame, but also they're working on getting in that desalination plant. I expressed a desire for city manager and I to maybe have an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation with Senator McGuire to talk about water. He was very open to that, and his office will be scheduling an appointment for that. So anytime we can advocate, it's always good. I also attended the news conference. The League of Cities is asking the state with their excess of money that they have in the surplus. We're asking a couple of things. We're asking for $500 million for the creation of the Housing and Economic Development Program, for $933.5 million for unfunded state mandates. So the state's always given us mandates, but no funding to go with it. So we're asking that they give us what they owe us, essentially, to implement their mandates. And then I had mentioned before, 180 million for organic waste recycling. So there was an opportunity for us to participate in our press conference so that all elected officials that were in attendance could join their voices together. And then we also advocated for some different legislative items around homelessness, climate resiliency, and housing. It was a busy day. I attended the African American Leadership Luncheon, which was very inspirational and insightful, and then spent a significant amount of time this afternoon discussing mental health and the role of cities to do their part to expand housing opportunities for all. I found it interesting that the city of Cloverdale, we often think that it's not cities' responsibilities, it's counties' responsibilities, and Cloverdale had talked about how their city felt like they were kind of left out of having mental health addressed and homelessness. They're kind of like the forgotten city in their county. And so they spent $75,000 from city funds, and they gave that out in contributions to nonprofits to help combat homelessness and mental health. They believe that mental health is the root of homelessness, and so I just thought that that was interesting, the perspective that they had, and that they were invested enough to spend local dollars on that. Also, the State Department of Healthcare Services has a new number for mental health response. Beginning on July 16, 2022, we're going to see a rollout. Instead of calling 911 when there's a mental health crisis, we'll all nationwide be directed, which that's a key point. It's nationwide. Every state is responsible for having their program ready, but you'll call 988 and you'll be able to speak to a trained counselor. And then the plan would be that after speaking to the trained counselor, there would be a warm handoff to local county services. The intent is to reduce police response. Too often our police departments are responding to mental health issues, and if we want to make this less of a response where police are involved in more of a social services response, then we have to start to approach things differently. So I thought that was interesting. That all came about due to legislation AB 988. If you're interested. And tomorrow is another full day.
Yes, Sabrina, you said that this was going to be a nationwide call number, but you mentioned that it was a state AB whatever. So how did that become nationwide, and is the nation funding this for everybody?
That's a really good question. Each state will have to come up with their own way of implementing it. So nationwide, we all know you call 911 when there's an emergency. The idea is that there will be a universal 988 that we all call when there's a mental health crisis. And each state is responsible for having a call center that's manned by trained counselors, and have a plan where they're working with local entities for a warm, they call it a warm handoff to county services.
How soon is that going to be implemented, do you think?
July 16th of this year.
Wow. Okay, that sounds great. I love it. Hope it goes well. Yeah. A good idea.
Yeah. I think that is all we have. What about good and welfare? Does anybody have any good and welfare this evening? Go ahead, Madge.
Yeah, I just want to announce again that on this coming Sunday, May 15th, starting at 2:30, Well and Little Lake Grange and several other organizations are co-sponsoring a candidates forum. So I know people started getting their vote by mail ballots already, but if there's any uncertainty or you want to know the candidates better, we're going to be interviewing the one sheriff candidate, which is Matt Kendall, and then the 2 candidates for the superintendent of schools and the 2 candidates for our District 3 Board of Supervisor member. And that's all happening at the Little Lake Grange on Sunday, starting at 2:30. If you can't attend in person, you can access it by Zoom, but you won't be interactive other than just putting in a question in the chat. So if you need to do the Zoom thing, contact me and I'll get you that link. Oh, and I'm sorry, but I also think that Mendocino Voice is planning to live stream it on Facebook or YouTube. I'm not sure where. Anyway, they're planning to live stream also.
All right. We have a closed session item. We have a conference with legal counsel pursuant to Government Code 54956.9, Alexis Blaylock versus the City of Willits. It is 8:27, and we will reconvene in closed session at 8:35. I thank you all for being here this evening. We'll report out anything from closed session should we have any.